Shirley here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Mars Day, Mars Hour, and Mars is 20 degrees Sag. Midheaven is applying to Al-Qaid. Ascendant is separating from Antares and conjoining the Sun. And we were stopping at the Venus Saturn, okay? And not only all the planets, which is Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and later on this year, Lilith, will square Saturn. They will be squaring Saturn from Mula Nakshatra, which means that we are going to be receiving the gnosis. And please watch my previous video so that you will not be triggered by this one. I've prepared the energy frame to discuss that. This square will be happening from Mula Nakshatra, and Mula Nakshatra is the galactic center, is where we transmute the core issues around humanity. Very important. And this is squaring Saturn at the end of Pisces towards the world degree. So it's kind of like, hey, before the head of the baby comes up, the transmutation is happening in the galactic center is meeting the Saturn-Neptune at the end of Pisces. Now, I have a midheaven there, so this entire conjunction is squaring my midheaven and my Neptune. So I'm one of the people that impersonate the spirit of the times the most. This is also why Marc Dutroux is being so thoroughly discussed, because he has his moon there. And I did see astrocartographically that the comments regarding Marc Dutroux affiliation with the East and West are very likely to have been right, because there are astrocartography significations of that. I'm not going to elaborate on that right now. There's an episode I recorded and haven't released yet. Regarding this issue. Now, the fact that, okay, so going back, wrapping up the Venus part, Venus is the value. If Saturn is squaring Venus, very simply put, Saturn is wrong. Okay, because Venus is value. If Saturn is squaring Venus, it can mean one of two things. Saturn needs to grow up into Venus. Okay, Saturn needs to grow up and honor Venus and the boundaries of Venus. The other thing, Saturn needs to go within to embody that Venus. And it's a crisis for Saturn. Okay, if I think about my Saturn is in Scorpio, Venus in the middle decan of Aquarius would be squaring my Saturn. So, for example, what would Venus in Aquarius be like? For example, Venus in Aquarius can be really a union that is both sapiosexual and maybe not even like, how is it? A union that is compatible even if it's not about, same gender or same genitals and so on and so forth. And then it would be my Saturn that would have to go within and embody that Venus. Okay? And say, okay, well, that Venus is obviously right. Now, my Saturn will have to go within and say, okay, with sexual transmutation, how do I embody that Venus? where is the real boundary? Because it's obviously not regarding what type of genitals or gender, um, or if something is, I mentioned the fact that, let's say, I have Mars in Scorpio, and the body, heart, mind, and soul alignment that is right and true for me is more important than what this alignment contains, which means that if it doesn't have sex and it's aligned, I would choose that rather than something that's misaligned sexually. Okay? So think about how the Saturn is going within and see, okay, how do I grow, or what is there in my where the and with Scorpio it's rather easy because Scorpio loves to grow. Where is the growth within? How do I go within to grow within sexually, occultistically, psychologically, to meet that Venus in a way where I can um, participate with that Venus, or in a way where I can create a union with that Venus. The other square would be from Leo, and then where my Saturn would have to go within and say, how do I grow to understand that even the external manifestation of Venus, being lavish, needing attention, being highly romantic, very open hearted, okay, unlike the way Scorpio expresses emotion, how do I grow within to understand that this is authentic? And Venus is absolutely entitled to that lavish, extravagant, unabashed self expression to be herself. Okay, or if my Venus is in Taurus, then the Saturn that, let's say, would be in the beginning of Aquarius would have to go within and say, how do I grow to understand that this Venus is telling me something that neither my ancestors nor those that rebelled them had the gnosis of? That her embodied sensual um, intuition and intellect are absolutely not wrong or misguided or immature, but there's actually something there that I need to go within to embody. And perhaps something that was missing that can sustain a relation in a way that I did not foresee, even if it's not with that particular Venus. Okay? Even if it means that, hey, well, that Venus holds a certain energy, she's entitled to that energy. I need to grow within to see that this is a fixed value, and there's a reason that that value is fixed, and I need to either honor that Venus as she is, or mate with another Venus, but definitely not think that this Venus needs to grow into being what I value, or that Venus is immature, or that Venus needs to change something about herself, or that Venus needs to grow up, where in fact one needs to go within and say, why am I attracted to this Venus? accidental astrological delineation here. Anyway, yeah. Um, okay, so with Mars, Mars has Mars has its own way. Okay, and Saturn would need to go within to understand where is the criticism of Saturn refining. Okay, where is it constructive criticism? But understand that if there is a square, Mars will just grow to be more Mars-like. And okay, to quote somebody that told me something in telepathy is very important. If you don't like the way of a man, you don't like the man, and that's very important when it comes to Saturn and Mars, because it's kind of, and this is also for um, it's also true to Marses, okay, like not to try to change one another's way, um, okay, because but also with Saturn Mars, Saturn needs to grow within and understand that Mars, by the refinement and growth process of Saturn, will only grow more Mars like into what Saturn originally criticized. Now, here's the thing: if Saturn is able to identify in the sextile and trine, Saturn is able to identify that Mars has a potential, and the constructive criticism can refine Mars here. Okay, for example, Saturn in the beginning of Aquarius would be a Saturn at the end of Capricorn, would be applying to square my Pluto, but it would sextile my Mars. It's my lot of fortune. I don't need Saturn there in the night chart. Thank you. But let's take another. A trine would be from Cancer, or a sextile from Virgo, or now Saturn is now at the end of Pisces, so it's basically a refinement of. But basically, I did water expands upon cooling. Um, with Saturn ingressing to Pisces. Wait a second. I tended to. It's the completion of me tending to political assassination prevention. Okay, because my Mars identified as something to do with sexual sovereignty, and then Saturn is refining from Pisces. Oh, this is how it affects sperm counts. This is the castration. This is the things to do with the genitals. That's to do with the inbreeding. That's to do with the beliefs. And this is where the entire thing begins to accumulate. It's like, okay, these are all the things that assassinate the people, okay, that I tended to the prevention of political assassination of. Or also, these are the things that create the assassination case of domestic violence. Because it's basically people that are growing into extortion cults. When they try to have a marital life, they don't really have a reference for love that's actually loving, because everything that is the closest it is to love, the more it was used as a bait. Now, of course, my Mars would only grow to understand it. We need to transmute and transform into sexual sovereignty. So if the Saturn is coming from a position of like, but this is the intelligence, but this is how we run the world. It's like, well, good morning, the world is changing. That's not how we thought to change it. Um, well, you want to perpetuate just another cycle upon cycle upon. Well, if you go short on it, then you end up on the guillotine. If you get away with it, they hunt you in Argentina or in Norway. It's kind of like Mars is becoming informed of Saturn, which is the implication across time. Okay? And then Mars, the young one, said, well, we got to change the intelligence then. Well, we got to change the way we do peace and war. We got to change the structure of the world. We got to change the structure of relations. And Mars' answer would only be, yes, we got to take action to change the structure. Well, Saturn is the structure. And Saturn was like, you know how difficult change is? Mars is like, probably you're right. And yet, either that or we die. So that's that's pretty much. And this is where the square is where Mars did not know that certain thing has those implications. Saturn did not know that that thing has a Mars that can take an action that severs the implication, the structure of implication that it so long predicted. Okay? Now, Saturn in its home signs could be predicting the. And here's the thing, Saturn in its home signs can predict a lot of things, but it doesn't quite predict how Mars will break its structure. And Mars is unpredictive of the fact that it would break Saturn's bones if needed be. Now, Mars doesn't always know if it's the right thing to break Saturn's bones. And Saturn didn't predict that Mars would be ready to break Saturn's bones for that. And Mars is probably right about something, and Saturn has the experience. But this is where they clash. Now, I'm not saying that any bones need to be broken in that process. Okay? In fact, why does Saturn exalt in Capricorn? Here's an evil one. Because it's breaking the bones of the rapists. Okay? Beta per se is the nature of Saturn and Jupiter, but also Denebalgity. They square each other. Why? Denebalgity is allocation of resources, like architectures, housing, and so on. Beta per se means that on the building, constructing, habiting, and the process of the way we make a change is the particular bone that we break of the rapist is the collarbone. So, while then algae is to the bone marrow. But beta per se is why that bone marrow is effed up to begin with. Okay? That being said, a good harmonious relation of Saturn and Venus is love to the bone. And within the bone, the wisdom and the insight that no bones need to be broken. Okay? It's like if nobody rapes children, If nobody rapes, no bones need to be broken. So there no war needs to be. And the world itself becomes depolarized, which also means that the moss is growing on the trees and the reindeer can feed themselves off of that moss, and the people don't have to feed themselves off of that reindeer so much. Because the nourishment of the soil is so rich that the amount of cruelty needed, or death needed, or sacrifice needed is way, 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 um, how should I say that? Way less. Okay? And again, I don't mean that, get me right in this, okay? The people that are indigenous and this something is currently their food, they have this soul connection of sacrifice for life that is of something that people that weren't exposed to that energy wouldn't get. For me, the first thing I was exposed to was that very energy. And again, I'm not living in that place currently, so I'm not going against the okay, it's not about criticizing the diet of the people right now, okay, just to make that very clear, because what I'm talking about is also the gnosis of the people there. And I saw that the people there saw that I see it, and they were like, oh my god, they see it. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. And even if there would be a feeding off of meat, okay, there would be more life is what I'm saying. Okay, so that is a natural part of life, but even the very core, okay, to the bone, we don't have the full picture of what the world would be like when we actually honor, okay, those things that I'm talking about. And this is a part of the change in structure. Okay, to make it extremely clear, um, okay, the current food of people of the Arctic is fish, raw fish, and dried caribou. That is the healthiest food for these people, and that is not something that is subjected to change. And also, when we people come to visit the Arctic, be particularly attuned to the First Nations, because I know that there's a lot of curiosity, but they know how much to hunt from something, and I rather not, even if I'm not lucky enough to taste the luxuries of the food of the place, because probably there would be many visitors, many tourists even, and probably it's not ethical to feed us all and maintain the ecosystem. Um, so for the people that do, that are actually privileged to go and physically visit, please listen to the people that are there, because they're gonna know, and they're gonna guide you through um, what can be accommodated and what cannot be accommodated. And this is important for not just the health of this region. There's a reason why the Arctic is so important right now, because as the world is changing, this is also the ocean, and those that control the ocean control the world. But it's not about control, it's more about understanding what does this region need, because this region senses the entire world. Okay, all of the regions in the world sense the entire world, but there's something that is very concentrated around the poles, where um, where there's a reason why that everything is, whether it's the intelligence and the science and the technology and the only indigenous societies that weren't, chased to extinction in certain lands, a lot of them are focused on the Arctic. Okay, there's just a reason that a place contains so much wisdom. Okay, so it doesn't mean that other regions are not particularly, follow your rahus. Okay, if your rahu, let's say, ends in Bulgaria, Bulgaria has a lot of gnosis. We had the teaching of Master Bain Saduno, people coming from all over the world to watch Sirius rise. So different people are connected with different energy centers, and and that is meaning that we're going to have a lot of, whether physical or trade-wise tourism. And this is where it's important to listen to the people of the land, because they have the closest proximity, okay, to that gnosis. Um, okay, but definitely what the deer were showing me, what the reindeer were showing me, is like they were eating moose off of the trunks of trees, that, and the particular trunks of trees were looking like the antlers. So there was, and it can be that the antlers might have even been used, that I don't know, this is my guess, like they might have been used to forge their way among these trees, or to even hide themselves among these trees, because it was kind of like the shape of the trunks were like the shape of the antlers, and and there was moss growing on the trunk of the trees that they were feeding themselves off of. So okay, so that's something that I very clearly saw, um, and uh, um, how a more depolarized world would basically grow more of those, of the food of the reindeers, um, and how everything that I want or that I need for my own loving growth is aligned with what the reindeer needs to eat. Okay, because this is the food of the people, not just the food, it's the everything of the people that live around the Arctic, and that was connected with how everything is interconnected. Okay, so it's going through my fourth house, and the ruler is in my second, so it's also to do with housing, food, the life and death transition, upbringing and origin, um, and um, and that was just kind of like a gnosis of how everything is interconnected, which to me is also said now, because she really showed us how to mistreat one child that is betrayed by the parents and be seen as too spoiled, when they carry uh, a gnosis around eroticism that could feed not just a nation or a tribe, but the world. And when that runs, we have to continuously appease Sedna with the right touch, and it would be the wisdom of the shamans that would need to get the touch that would appease Sedna, and then they would get the gnosis that would feed the people. And that had to do with marine life, which has to do with the wealth of the ecosystem of the ocean. So that's the authentic thing, not the ritual satanic abuse thing. Um, and it's funny because we talk about connection to nature, and we find the highest of technologies, and we talk about the highest of technologies, and we see that the aurora lights are acting like a communication. So that's something that to me exists in the poles. To other people, it exists elsewhere. Um, and I think that's a good thing to keep in mind in the coming months, leading to the Saturn Neptune conjunction in the world degree. The Uranus going to the for good ingress to Gemini, which is afterwards, which means it would reingress and reconjunct Sedna. Okay, that's already in Gemini. Um, Also, the encounter of me with Sedna that came through astrology. I heard about Sedna as something that might have even been cultural appropriation, to name an asteroid in the name of an ancient Inuit goddess, and it's like it's not the Hellenists. Inuits are still here, so. And I think it was not an Inuit astrologer or astronomer, and then Sedna honoring by astrology is kind of like, oh, how do we venerate Sedna? How do we do Sedna charity? Well, let's look at the, well, honor Inuit culture, support preserving of Inuit languages, um, think about, what are the problems of Inuit people? Oh, the high food prices. Wait a second, that correlates exactly to the Sedna story. Uranus rules suicide. Well, the highest suicide rates in the world, and they address the fact of both colonialism and internal structures that would, unfortunately, be a challenge regarding to the domestic life and sexual boundaries. But they also have the healing. They also have the particular healing of the vocal cords with the traditional throat singing, and it's kind of like there's just everything's coming from there. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe to buy something of Sedners to do with Inuit culture, buy Inuit related stuff. Oh, wait a second, what do Inuit do? They do earrings, they do the special beads, the special shoes. And I'm like, well, isn't it cultural appropriation to wear that? No, that's supporting Inuit business if you buy it from the Inuit. and, and that's it's like, okay, that's very interesting. Um, and like, okay, where we can get that on Etsy. Oh, aren't Etsy owned by Vanguard and BlackRock? Yes, but that's where that's how we can buy like a Sedna portrait where the donation is to shelter that houses people that escape domestic violence, which is exactly the topic of Sedna, and that in a very weird way we kind of the world begin to appease Sedna both through technology and also through business changes, which leads us to the ushering of the 7 years of Uranus in Gemini, where even Rockefeller had to appease women's rights. Okay, let's just talk about that's the time when women got the right to vote. And why was there a delay with the black women's right to vote? When the black men were enslaved, they weren't raping black women. And the black women were raising the children of the white women. So they weren't having their own children, which means that the children will not be taken to trafficking. It's not the raison d'etre, okay? It's not like a white woman thought about the welfare of the black woman. No, she wanted the person to raise her children. It's like, oh, they're taking the black, they're taking the nannies. But what about the black household? Wasn't there domestic violence there? I mean, we know the structure of extortion cults that preceded Gladio. Well, it's only when the black woman gets the right to vote, and the same arguments that women in the 50s, black women were having with black men in the 50s about their households, they're having today. Black women giving advice to white women. White women don't go for the tricks of these black men. They're gonna try to appeal for your sympathy. And so on. Like they know the drama, they know the drill. Okay. Now, of course, not all black men, but not all men. And it is only when the black woman is safe and free in her household that the black man gets the right to vote. Not for nothing. If it would be the other way around, then it would be the other way around. It's just that the black women still have to argue the same arguments that they've been having with men in the 50s about them having a career or having a work life balance or being something other than a mom in order to maintain happy relations. And the men thinking that this is too far off. How do they expect to have, how do they expect black lives to matter if they don't matter to the black man? I mean, same with Jewish life, Israeli life, Palestinian life, okay? Take it anywhere. Um, if the agreements between men are about trafficking women, then nobody is free. Or children. Which is like, the gold standard was children. How do we expect to have human rights if we consolidate them on raped babies? So this is, and then we're going to have Mercury square Saturn, and Mercury square Saturn. Let me give you a Mercury square Saturn. When they were practicing the gender neutral language, they used dots. There's nothing more Mercury in language than the dot. Okay? It's the smallest symbol that has a linguistic meaning. And they were using these dots in Hebrew to have a both male and female expression of the word. And then I was writing with all these dots, and then somebody turned to me and was like, Julie, please, I cannot with that. I have ADHD. I am atypical. I really try to read what you write, but I cannot with these dots. This is an example of Mercury Saturn. And my first degree was in politics and governance juxtaposed with linguistics. So I was really trying to be attuned to everybody's language. So this is the square of Mercury and Saturn. Saturn is a restriction. Mercury is language, technology. Okay? For example, Rolls-Royce, the car. um, Rolls-Royce, the car, uh, is a car that holds a century. That's what Rolls-Royce has been famous in. The old Rolls-Royces, the advertisement for Rolls-Royce was 100 years old man with his first car that's still driving. Now, the people that flinch upon me mentioning the brand, don't flinch, leak. Tell me what bothers you. That's the time to talk about that. You don't have to mention names, mention structures. But the structures with Saturn in Aries are going to have names. And some of them are going to be mythical, and some of them are going to be brand names. So, then we're going to have Lilith. Now, here is the thing, all of these squares to Saturn and Neptune are going to happen from Mula Nakshatra. Now, you think about Venus on Mula Nakshatra. What would Venus on Mula Nakshatra? Because that's values. Now, here is the thing. Usually, I remember when I saw a video about couples that lasted half a century and so on, and the woman was saying, "Oh, we always talk about things. We communicate. We communicate. Communication is very important." And the man was like, "She talks, I listen." There is nothing more than Venus on the freaking world degree, like on the freaking, how should I say it? Venus values in on the galactic center. Like authentically, Saturn cannot say anything but she's right. Now, and here's the thing: I don't have Venus there. I don't know what will Venus say there. When was Venus last crossing the galactic? I don't know, but now she's gonna be doing that square in Saturn, and whatever is the value of Venus at the time, Saturn will have to. Neptune has to surrender that, okay? And then we're gonna have Black Moon Lilith there. So, Black Moon Lilith square Saturn. You know what? Let's take a look at this transit because I want to think about Black Moon Lilith in the galactic Saturn center square Saturn as a Black Moon Lilith squares Pluto, or Black Moon Lilith squares Neptune, because this is where calculating, calculating. No, it trines. Remember when I had a technique of bringing in the trine and the sextiles? We're gonna need that. Further calculating. That opposes. Okay, Lilith opposition Pluto. Lilith hard aspect to Pluto. Okay. So Lilith on the galactic center squaring Saturn and Neptune. There is some, there can be some mass death of those that were sex offenders. This is, particularly those that lived with the archetype of like the whore of Babylon. Okay, because the whore of Babylon was basically probably a 6, 7, 8, 9 years old child. Okay, so what does it make of Babylon? Um, okay, think about the mythical image figure to do with sexual sovereignty. That would obviously be the whore of Babylon. The whore of Babylon was obviously a 6, 7, 8, 9 years old child that historically was mythically known as the whore of Babylon. Okay, so and in Mula Nakshatra, she's going to remind that to everyone. This is why Master Bain Saduno talked about the fact that there will be many more deaths than the First and Second World War altogether. How many people have to die for a 6, 7, 8, 9 year old child not to be considered the whore of Babylon. And as many as needed on the scales, more, the galactic center is sextile in Spica and then Abalgadi. It inconjuncts Beta Persei. And why does it inconjunct Beta Persei? Because Beta Persei was murdered. Okay, Medusa was murdered. But the galactic center is sextile in Spica, which is actually justice. And Deneb Algadi, which is the defender from. Okay, so while Beta Persei as a talisman is definitely the defender from, um, here the galactic center is kind of like, wait a second, before we talk about the fact that it was rape, which is Medusa Gorgon, that was a child. Like, it was not even an adult. Now, very likely Medusa was a child as well. But Medusa's story, what we know of, is the rape, the woman that was raped and not believed, that was thought to be a third party. Young occultists that are doing a talisman of this and have this in their seventh house. All aboard! She's not a third party! And and the galactic center is reminding us that um, that wait a second, with third party, no third party. The whore of Babylon was a child that was trafficked. There is no mythical whore of Babylon. That's the myth. That's what's underneath the myth. It was a trafficked child that was tortured to make it look like they're singing in double entendres and meaning that. What a child, it doesn't even understand what that means. And it fractures eroticism, which was meant to be a ritual that would fracture eroticism for humanity so that humanity will not know love. And our wisdom teeth, anybody got the wisdom teeth still on? Above 30, above 25, above 35, above 40. What's the color of those wisdom teeth? That's our hearts that we lost in that structure. There is no such thing as a whore. There is no such thing as a prostitute. There is no such thing as a cheap, well, there's no such thing as a girl that doesn't. There are raped children. That's the only thing that there is there. Now, again, when I talk about the transit, usually the energy of the transit is arriving, and we kind of got the gist of what Black Moon Lilith squaring Neptune and Saturn. And it's a good thing that while she still tries them, I say that because now I say that nicely. Okay, it's kind of like there are implications. This is why people historically believe that. Um, this is where, okay, this is the framework. These are all the framework of, like it was said, Neptune and okay, and the Arctic and wealth consolidation and so on and so forth. Think about the wealth consolidation around the natural resources regarding the Arctic. Okay. Now, one of the reasons I didn't upload, I'm going to address that. Donald Trump has a very important materializing location to do with his career in Greenland. He also has Sun 22nd degree juxtaposed to that Rahu, which he could get himself, and yet there's something fated with him wanting to be there. So I don't know. I'm not Donald Trump, and this is because I don't know how to address that, because Sun 22 can be assassination, and it is with Rahu, and the Rahu astrocartography line is Greenland, and so I don't know how to address that. So I addressed it as, and normally I would address things as political assassination prevention, but the Sun is so close to Rahu here, and Rahu is something that materializes, so Trump could get himself dead over that. I guess he probably already knows that, so that's a good time to think about a legacy. What would he want to be the legacy? Because what would be worth dying for to achieving Greenland? And that think about something that's relevant after the person's ego, which is Sun, is no longer something that transcends ego, transcends time. I don't know. I'm not Trump, um, and and that's kind of like, whoops, kind of like one of these moments for me as an astrologer, and I'm like, whoops, what do you do with that one? Okay, because it's obviously meant to be there. Yet the Sun is 22 in there. You could get assassin there, but he's fated to go there. Well, what's worth that? What's worth that risk? Probably not the thing to do with the ego, but yet it's the Sun. So it has to transcend something here. And I don't know. Okay, and right about where he goes to that location is where things are becoming risky. Um, so um, so all of these squares to Saturn and Neptune from the galactic center, Mars, Sun, Venus, Lilith, Mercury, are going to be very big, mythical level conversations. And my prediction is that the myth of each planet, the myth of Mars, who is Mars? Is not the rapist, it's Ares, is the god of war that kills the rapists. So why is war done with raping boys and girls and extorting people to participate in all kinds of the meeting of the sun? What is the meat of the sun? Apollo, the removal of tyranny. I'll just leave it at that. Venus, what is the meat of Venus? Aphrodite. Well, why do we rape Aphrodite? What is the myth of Lilith? The wife that wouldn't comply with Adam. What wife? How old was she? She was cast to the heaven, and then the story that she would take the children. Why would she take the children? In what situation it would be preferred to kill the child? Well, probably so that the child wouldn't be raped. Why would she think about it? Oh, because she was a child and she escaped rape. And she became a demon that takes the children from the rapists. And by the way, here's the thing. There is the Lilitu, Liliti, Lilita, Liliti, that people put, they put that above the baby, the cradle of the baby. Kind of like, hey, make sure there's no rape in the house, the city, the building, the land, and so on. Way better, because what you're doing when you put the Lilitu, Lilita is you're invoking Lilith. Okay, so like, if that's undesired, you're invoking her. Lilith is also the succubus. Why would somebody be a succubus? Well, what happens in ritual satanic abuse or ritual abuse? They rape the babies and children and girls to take the life energy from them. What happens when they meet a succubus? Whoop! Back to that energy. Take it back with the energy and the life energy of somebody came to rob it. Now, of course, in the extortion cults, they use succubus, okay, to take the energy of people. Let's just put it that way. Most cases, if a person is attacked by an incubus or a succubus, it's not the particular person that they've been with, but their handler. Or that they were so tortured that they became an incubus or succubus. Okay? So definitely protecting ourselves energetically is important and vital. But who are the people that are most, other than the spiritual warfare where they try to attack all humanity, who are the people that are more susceptible to that? Well, the people that go to like if you exchanged money to sleep with her or him, okay? If you exchange money to sleep with her or him, then they, of course, you might run into a succubus. What are you gonna cry about? That was not fair trade? You were raping a person for money. Okay, you're paying them money to be raped. You're paying them money to put on a show. Were you gonna cry about that deal not being fair? And not only that, you were trying to take that child to a ritual or that adult. And that adult would always be the child that was smuggled out of the trafficking cult. You were paying money to take that child, and that child could have been not surviving even. To take their life energy, what were you expecting to happen? Are you gonna get assassinated? Are you gonna get your energy taken? Lilith reminds us that, okay? Now, of course, if people are, let's say, meet someone and they're an incubus, okay? Um, if you're not a rapey person and you weren't like trying to hire them as a sex worker or whatnot, um, okay, then very likely you are not to blame for that type of interaction. That person was manufactured as a form of a sex offender by design because